Hey, it's Chris. August is almost upon us, and so what do you need to know? My best upcoming, most anticipated games on crowdfunding of August. Now, this is going to be an interesting list because there is a lot all over the place, and a lot of these are not as well known from smaller companies. So a lot of testing of the market as well as testing of the wallet. But that's why we talk about them, because a couple of these also might surprise you, which is why we do this. Let's go. Surprise away, baby. First up, Matthew Meeple, Ascendancy, new designer, One More Turn Games. We're seeing what they can do with a 4X fantasy game with a little bit of worker placement, action event, and asymmetric heroes based on choosing your house factions that you're going to battle in this, hex-based game. And it looks similar just with the hex-based situations right now to another recent game that came out that uses those, Expeditions. Now, again, completely different scope here, but, fantasy. So what's going to be going on in this game? Well, for starters, like I said, you're choosing your royal house with these ancient, powerful champions as you go along in this beautifully color illustrated game. Now, here is the design that's going to be modular as you're going along in terms of the area control aspect of things and the tiles themselves as you're doing worker class, worker placement, if you will, depending on what goes where and who does what in those locations. Frontier areas, supply areas, economics, 100% optional PvP combat in the style of rock, paper, scissors, they say. Huge 200 different things on a tech tree that you can unlock with all asymmetry. Now, they've been testing this one out online for quite some time, and so people are rather pleased, even though it looks a little bit complicated, as you can see with the pictures here. Now, JRPG style combat? I'm intrigued. But as you saw there, you're also going to upgrade your heroes. And so they've got a lot going on there. I've actually got a prototype copy on my way. And so I'll probably have played it by the time this video airs, and I'll give you some more thoughts at the time of the campaign. But also just a very interesting combination. Is it going to work? You saw how much text was on some of those cards, tiles, and heroes. And so how much of that can you mitigate? How much of overhead is going to be needed? How long is this game going to stretch out? Is it going to go too long? Those are the issues with a game like this, especially in the 4X genre, you have to be aware of. And it's based off of, they say, development of the last 4 years of the other 4X and Civilization type games that we've seen. So yeah, really intriguing prospect right now. Now interjecting here for a second, Call of Duty, August, Arcane Wonders, crowdfunding? Yeah, details are sparse. So we're going to see if it goes live this week or in this month, because that's kind of the question, right? Does Call of Duty need a board game? Can you do Call of Duty the board game? Is it going to be more like Mythic Siege 6? Now this is 2-player, this is first-person shooter as opposed to a team-based tactical situation, but what does that look like? We've seen prototypes floating around on social media. We've seen a little bit of hype, a little bit of hotness here and there, but not a whole lot of information, thrown out there as a whole. So is it going to be any good? Is it going to be anything more than a miniature, heavy-driven tactical skirmish game? I don't know. Does that sound familiar? Apex Legends. We just saw that. So what are you doing different? Again, first-person shooter style as opposed to any of the MOBA-esque team-based or individual situations. And I have no clue. No clue what the price point is going to be looking like for this as well. Or subsequently, is it going to be a Foundations of Rome situation we've got going on here? Where, well, someday there's going to be an actually affordable version. But don't worry, it's a really good game, folks. It only costs you $250 to get a copy of the game. Right? Like, I could easily do with a $40 copy at retail. That's going to be the big question, and why Call of Duty, as much as, IP intrigue, buyer beware right now until it launches. Next up, again, something a little bit different, something a little bit new. Dragori Games is bringing us a revisiting of Warhammer the card game, or Heroes of Terranoth, if you're more familiar with that. The game that really never got any support as a card-driven fantasy-esque cooperative player versus game style AI system. And they are taking that system and giving us it with dragons and fantasy with additional layers of strategy. Okay. More objectives, more sense of urgency, better AI system, fighting off dragons and villains and minions. I'm, again, gonna be really interested to see what this does. With this one, as well as the upcoming Defenders of the Realm Legends Retold from Greater Than Games, these are the card-driven combat systems that we have not seen to any great depth reimagined, reawakened. And so, you know, when I look for something like this, I'm looking at like Marvel Champions more so. But this is Marvel Champions without maybe the LCG by a ton. But it also needs to be supported. And that was the problem with Heroes of Terranoth. And Heroes of Terranoth, when I played it before I traded it away, it was just kind of, okay, it felt very samey in every mission and each playthrough. And so that's what I'm looking more for this. I don't need like tons and tons of stuff, right? But I need some variability in the actual game-to-game situation, which is what I'm hoping both of these first two are going to offer us in spades. So we're going to see. And again, I'm going to have a copy of this, so I'll have some thoughts, hopefully sometime during the campaign when it goes live. But again, what's going to be the incentive on both of these? Ascendancy, that's a big scope. That's also probably going to be a big price. This is a card-driven game. How do you price card-only? I think it's card-only driven games on crowdfunding as well. What's the incentive? Now, the next game on the list, number 3 here, I have covered their previous games, Bite Wings. You know, we talked about Gutsy Gorillas, we talked about Zuvatus, I talked about Trailblazers. This is going somewhere, you know, a little bit actually more up my aesthetic. It's a little bit of horror, but it's a head-to-head cooperative, but it's a head-to-head competing treasure hunters going through tile-laced rooms with a little bit of auction, bidding, and deduction all wrapped into one. So it kind of gives me a little bit of Zuvatus in terms of like the auction style aspect of things, but it's doing something completely different because the lore behind it is, okay, at a special night, this manor gets activated, you can go in there and get treasure, but you only have a certain amount of time before like it strikes midnight and the manor shuts off. There's glyphs and curses and wards and demons, and you have to deduce where they are and where they aren't and avoid them and grab the most and also get out before, you know, time's up. So yeah, beginner mode, standard mode, advanced mode? Okay, Bitewing. I'm intrigued. I'm looking for something head-to-head. You know, something maybe, and that's only the hesitation I have right now, is too much deduction, right? Too much deduction turns into dry, for me personally. I mean, that's why I traded away Search for Planet X. Awesome game, too dry. Just bleh, right? Sit there, just, you know, sit with your pencil down and just, yeah. And so that's where I'm hoping Search for Lost Species, the sequel follow-up standalone, is going to do better. But this also gives me vibes of that, like, okay, where is that line going to be? And with Bitewing, we've seen a little bit of premium content, especially with Zuvatus, and we've seen a little bit of a price point. So again, what is it going to be in this game as well? Color me intrigued. Now, the next one is going to be Midhalla. Midhalla, again, another game from a new designer, a new company, a cooperative dungeon crawl with, you know, sort of tower defense elements, meets Gloomhaven-esque, and a Viking theme. Yeah, that's all being rolled into one with a heavier miniature-driven aspect here. Combination of an exploration system and a combat-based campaign system, adding new gameplay elements as you progress, unlocking things. You've heard all of that stuff. Trying to eliminate, and this is where the Gloomhaven comparison comes in, trying to eliminate randomness as much as possible, competing on the complex strategy side of things, a la the card play that is driven by Gloomhaven in the first place. Fully replayable, hopefully, whatever that means with the campaign style of things, because again, how long is the campaign? How deep is it? There's a ton of information in terms of video content, playthroughs, and a few previews on Board Game Geek already. So if you want to know more from this Viking aesthetic Gloomhaven-esque feel, definitely give it a look-see. And when it goes live later this month, we'll see how it actually compares head-to-head. And again, price point-wise with a miniature-driven game here, I guarantee you're going to be talking triple digits. It's just how high triple digits in the first place. Speaking of triple digits though, Mantic is coming back to crowdfunding. No, not more Hellboy, but something that hits a little bit closer to heart, especially for me from a nostalgia standpoint. Worms. Remember that PC game from, you know, my childhood, dating myself here, but it's coming to crowdfunding. Now, it has almost over 10,000 people on the Kickstarter pre-launch page at the time of me filming this, which is, again, relatively insane. If you had asked me which one of all these games on this video is going to have the most followers in beforehand, I would not have guessed that initially. But the IP apparently still holds true to other people, nostalgia-wise and hopium-wise, from my standpoint, as well as theirs. So what are we gonna see, though? No one knows. No one knows! I mean, if you're not familiar with the classic Worms game, Basically, the picture is this worm holding a gun and a grenade. And so, as you can see, you just fire stuff and it arcs across the screen, and it's the whole first Tank Wars trajectory style with just a ton of items, right? The key thing was this was sort of Super Smash Bros. Before Super Smash Bros., where you didn't really necessarily maneuver and fight back and forth quickly, but you could definitely position, move your worm, switch weapons, pick up weapons that dropped onto the board in crates, ammos, just all sorts of crazy things. How are you going to do this, though? And with Mantic, we have seen heavily driven miniature games. And so I don't want to see worms in miniatures. I want to see something that is going to be more practical. How are you going to simulate the terrain? How are you going to simulate the layers of the terrain? How are you going to simulate the terrain blowing up? How are you going to simulate the worms getting knockbacked and the physics that went along with that? I have no clue. And if you can't capture that, you know what? I could easily pass on this one, because I can't imagine, if it is, and I have no confirmation of this one way or the other, miniature driven, which I'm heavily supposing it is. Again, triple digit price point for this. That's going to be a hard sell for me. But with Mantic's other stuff, we have not seen wide retail distribution whatsoever, especially with, the previously mentioned Hellboy, which if you missed it the first time around, you really just can't get most of it. I mean, the second Hellboy campaign on crowdfunding didn't even offer the first time around stuff whatsoever. And so that's going to be the question. How FOMO heavy is this one going to be? Because I can see this one by far and away being the most FOMO heavy of all of the ones we've talked about. Okay, next up, we're going to go a completely different direction. I've covered that previously when I talked about Lands of Galzier from Snowdale Design. Well, Semi Lasco is coming back with a reimplementation of one of the first games from the company, Peacemakers, Dawn of Peacemakers. And now this is Peacemakers Horrors of War. And this one really intrigues me because it's a cooperative driven scenario style game where you get a strong emphasis on trying to go for peace while you having asymmetric characters and apparently what they're saying, more streamlined rules and individual scenarios instead of a linked campaign that you're forced to sort of go along through. The basic gist of it, if you're not familiar with the original game, is that you are one of several different asymmetric animal-based kingdoms, and you're trying to negotiate the peace between them, set in the same world of Dale of Merchants, if you're familiar with their other designs, which is one of the most underrated games ever? ? Definitely deck building. And you're using your cards to influence the various armies and the player-controlled adventurers to make sure that war doesn't break out. It's just, if you aren't familiar with the first one, what is going to be the incentive to get it now? I mean, I love the reimplementation, right? I criticized, but then also mea culpa when, Raiders of the Lost Sea Redux or Ship, whatever, you know what I'm talking about, the one latest on crowdfunding from Garfield Games. When they re-implemented that, I was kind of like, But then I looked through it and I said, okay, wow, you've really done some good things with this. And you know what? Yeah, I'm going to pick that up maybe at retail now. Lands of Galzier, the other games that I've mentioned previously already, the original Dawn of Peacemakers, the original Dale of Merchants, you can't get those at retail. You can only get them through Snowdale Designs web shop. And so that's going to be really the thing that you need to be aware of. What is the price point going to look like? Now, Lands of Galzier ended up being a little bit more expensive overall. Granted, I understand it both ways. I would have expected a little bit lower price point, but as long as you didn't get the all-in, it wasn't bad either. So we're going to see what they have in store for us with this one, because as a, self-proclaimed lover of hard cooperative games, I really had not had this one on my radar at all, and now I do, which kind of makes me excited at the same time from that aspect, because I'm always looking for new, different, innovative games, and Galzier was one of the first ones that did into that sort of peaceful, zen-like exploration campaign games. And also Dale of Merchants, like I mentioned just a minute ago, incredibly unique, hasn't really been replicated elsewhere in terms of the deck building set collection style of things. And so, I expect greatness from this as well. So Sammy, show me what you got. Next up, we're talking Algomancy. Now, this is a weird title for a 2 to 6 player. Now, this is a weird title for a 2 to 6 player sort of control over, battling mages, if you will. And you have up to like 10 different classes of cards that you're going to be potentially drafting from to engage in a head-to-head combat in an AI simulated world as the thematic incorporation. Okay. Now, this is going to be an interesting test of the market. It has a really couple, like 1,000 or 2,000 followers already on the pre-launch page on Kickstarter, but it's a 2 to 5 player, essentially, pre-draft or cube draft, if you're familiar with that from the Magic the Gathering side of things, to draft your various factions, cards, and asymmetries and strengths as you go through apparently several different types of game modes, depending on how you want to link together, especially at the lower or the higher player counts. You're creating your deck, and then you're drafting as you go along too, and you can play up to 6 though, because you can play 3-on-3. Read through the rulebook on their website, and it's got a lot going on. The terminology isn't the most intuitive, but I'm intrigued to see what they can show us, and especially with the drafting. Drafting, you know, deck construction, which is really what this is. Deck building, deck construction, you know, how much of one, how much of the other, because it's a lot of construction. And the biggest barrier with construction games is just people that want to spend the time constructing. So if you're engaging me as part of the gameplay with construction, that's one thing. If you're making me gameplay after I construct, that's a whole nother thing. The aesthetic is beautiful. It gives you this dark noir sort of mage-like battling sense, but we've seen a lot of these. And how is it actually going to stand out? What's going to make this campaign unique, and what's going to make the eyes not only attracted to it, but the wallets opening up and spending money on it? And that is the tricky part here. So we'll see. Next up, we have Mistwind coming from First Fish Games. This is a very unique pick up and deliver style game where you're essentially these big airships built on trade networks using whales. Yes, Chris said whales because your fuel are krill. That's actually what whales eat, in case you're not familiar with that. I watch a lot of animal shows and Wildcrafts in my house, so I'm very familiar with this side of things, right? Kids, what can I say? But a little bit heavier. It's almost got a 4 rating in terms of the heaviness on Board Game Geek. Take that for what you will. But you're strategically building these networks, trying to connect nations, trying to pick up and deliver with a worker placement style of things where you are laying down numbered tokens at the beginning of each round, determining the order of your actions in the first place. Now, there is a written review on Board Game Geek that says, you know, if you only play the first couple rounds of this game, like it's 4 rounds total, I think. If you only play the first couple rounds, you're not going to get the full sense of what this develops by the end of the game with the outposts and the ships and the all this back and forth, right? Which is cool, right? To know that the complexity and the tactician nature of the game explodes as it goes on, but that also worries me because if you're also telling me, which sort of this review implies, that it's a little boring in the first couple rounds, like, why am I going to want to spend that much time looking at it, especially when you tell me it's going to take like 2 hours to play? I don't want to be bored the first hour. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be like that, but that's the worry with something like this, something that needs to ramp up, right? If you've ever heard that phrase or that statement in design, it's okay, if the first couple turns are the same for everybody, or they are very, very similar, skip that part and just get to the good part, right? I mean, for me, personally speaking, Oceans, great game, but skip the first half of the game because the deep deck, in terms of all the asymmetry, cool, power-breaking, awesome modifications, were in the second half. And I could do without the first half nearly as much. And so that's what I worry about this. If you've got a miniature-driven ship traveling game, we've seen 1 or 2 of those in the past couple of years, and they're expensive. Like, what was that, Windward, I think? That one? I mean, like, super expensive for what they are. And so these little flying ship representations are going to cost you a pretty penny, but we'll kind of see where it goes and see, you know, kind of how you feel later. Now, next up, Liege of Dungeoneers. Now, I had a prototype copy of this the first time it came around to crowdfunding, and I had to apologize to the designer and, you know, the creator of it, because it was just too heavy for me. It is a dungeon crawl with really an emphasis on the D&D side of things, with a heavy party management style, with you know, that element blended together. And it's beautiful. And if you're looking for D&D as a board game, this is probably the closest and heaviest thing that you're ever going to see on, well, crowdfunding and the Board Game Geek side of things. Because again, over a 4 rating, I mean, people love it. It's got an 8.8 rating on Board Game Geek, but this is a heavy, heavy game. This is a niche game. Now, that rating is only with like 170 ratings at the time of me filming this, so take that for what you will, but it is like detailed. Campaign, 22 quests, miniatures, super detailed aspects of party upkeep. If you are an accountant of party upkeep, this is going to be your game. If you don't want that though, and that's where I've had to apologize, out of my depth of, you know, being able to handle it that much and that much overhead and that much time commitment, this is truly falling on the lifestyle side of things, if you will. So again, neither good nor bad, no judgment there, but you need to know what you're getting into, and this is going to be one of the heaviest ones that you're going to see on crowdfunding at all. So second to last here, we have a game I never even heard of prior to this, but Warped Reality Games is bringing us Potions of Azerland, where you're gathering the resources needed to construct potions with a top-bottom driven choice on how you're going to do your actions. Essentially a bidding selection system where you've got 5 bidding numbers, 1 through 5 every single round. And so you put them through the actions, labeling where you want. I think you only use 4 of the 5. I can't remember exactly, but the key thing there is you can choose to take actions, or you can choose to like get resources or gold instead. And so the gold is going to be helpful to buy other things that you're going to need, but where the ranking comes into the numbers, the higher you choose, that determines the order in which you take the actions. And why that matters is you're going to be then getting more dice for said actions to roll in the first place to then get more of the stuff you need to build the potions. And all of these are going to be a little bit different in how they work to get these special powers and the simultaneous tech tree action selection system that they've got set up here. 6 rounds to make these potions, gain prestige, get temporary powers, get long-lasting powers to get the most points for your travelers by the end of the game. So this could be an easy sleeper hit. You know, this is a game where the mechanistic approach is going to be slightly different, hopefully. It's going to give you just something under the radar, and if the price point is right, you know, I do worry about games that are dice heavy, because often dice is a bigger overhead commitment like miniatures, but I'm intrigued to see what they can do with this, and so we'll see when it goes later this month and where it ends up funding. And so last up this week is Aethermon, and now I'm gonna include a little mini review here with this one. This is sort of Pokemon-esque, but it's set collecting, and it's kind of this different vibe because based on the number of players, you have a grid that is set out in front of you, and you have sets of different colors of these creatures, right? And these creatures are going to have like 2 different little symbols on them that you're going to be using to match up. And if you get like a full set, it's going to give you more points. If you get a partial set, obviously less. But you're going to be having to draft from the row or the column from where the previous person took one. So you choosing is going to basically be the strategy in which you're going to try to base your gameplay off of, because it's not only going to reflect what the next person can do, but it's also going to reflect, you know, the sets that they can collect. More people, more different colored sets, the bigger the grid is. Less and less. Now they have a little bit of an artifact selection system that goes along with it. They can give you some asymmetric powers that you can draft at the beginning of the game. I kind of have mixed feelings about it. I didn't think it was doing anything terribly unique so far. It's nice, it's quaint, the art is kind of okay, it's like Pokemon Light, if you will. They definitely went with that aesthetic and that vibe. 10 to 20 minutes is definitely the sweet spot, so it's a nice light filler. But I'm hoping for something more when the crowdfunding campaign goes live, because I also didn't feel strongly enough that, you know, I would say go out there and get this, right? It's not like scout levels of interest. It's not like that complexity. It's basically just kind of what I said. Now, but you need to be looking for something in that lines of depth, complexity, and time frame, because otherwise, I mean, I can also see people looking for something a little bit more out of this, and it might be lacking unless they've got a little bit more on the page, hopefully, that we don't know about yet, and that would be interesting to see and watch, but that's also why it's the last one on this list here. So there you go. That's August right now as of what we know in a nutshell. But if you're new to this, I do a roundup every single week, breaking down mechanistically, reading the rule books, telling you everything you need to know about a campaign and a game. Every single Friday, well, almost every single Friday, except for the one before this because I was on vacation. But like 50 weeks a year, I do that. So I look at more rule books than almost anyone on the internet, and I love doing it. And we have our new feature of Don't Back Anything! Why I also give you a contrasting video once or twice a month that says, don't back this. Let me tell you why you shouldn't back this on crowdfunding, and you should wait for it or just not get it in general. So, yeah, a little bit of everything. That's August. Couple games, especially just, you know, the ones that you always anticipate, those are the easy ones to talk about, right? It's these hidden gems, things like Ascendancy, things like Spectral, The ones that come out of nowhere that you're really intrigued by, the ones that really test my wall at least. So hopefully they do the same for you, you know, in a good way, because I like challenging myself to, you know, go outside my comfort zone too. Not too far. Things I know I'm still going to like. I'm getting better at that. You know, I don't know what, like a decade into the hobby. Who'd have thought, right? I have too many games already. Peace out. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you made it this far and you haven't subscribed. If you made it to this far in the video, you put up with me this whole time and you're not subscribed, like you owe it to yourself to actually click that button. That's why I always throw it at the end, right? Because no one watches this part. Peace out. Stay classy.